So
All
anything
right.
you say now is going to be recorded forever.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. And as soon as we're live, I'll be connected to Facebook so I can translate any questions that come through.
Okay, cool.
Pass them on to you, and you can just focus here on Zoom with me.
Nice.
Which is super easy.
So yeah, the less complicated for me, the better.
You were early though. I'm still impressed that you were early. It's awesome. All right, so I'm over on our page. I'm just gonna see, we should be live over here. Looks like we are, which is great. So let me pull this up so I can see what we're doing. All right. There we are. Folks on already watching, which is great. Oh my goodness. Early. Awesome. So I'm just going to repeat the last question that I asked you, Ben Sussman. Yeah. Can you tell us what you do for RISE?
Yeah, so I am the outreach specialist for RISE Cannabis in Massachusetts. So basically, I just do everything that, could be considered community outreach. It's pretty far-reaching. I feel like the list keeps growing, especially during these times. But yeah, so I'm, for RISE Cannabis in Mass, I'm just the guy that's the face of the company that's out there working with community partners. I've done local news interviews, pretty much anything that, needs to be done that our management team is too busy to handle. That's me.
That's you. It comes back to you. And yeah. I'm so fascinated by, obviously this is a fairly new industry for the country. Mm-hmm. You and I were just mentioning a second ago that it's still state by state, right? Mm-hmm. So rules are changing, people's feelings are changing. There's a lot going on right now around questions about what it even means that marijuana is starting to be legalized in different states, and the sort of tendriling out of questions that come up. So for you as an outreach specialist, mm-hmm. how do you keep up with these changes that are just constantly coming at you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you obviously you need to be flexible and ready for that. I think, for the cannabis industry, I feel like coming into the cannabis industry, you're sort of immediately acclimated to the idea that, you're obviously highly regulated.
Right.
Things are being figured out on the fly by local governments, state governments. In Massachusetts, the Cannabis Control Commission. You have these regulations that have been written and things that have been figured out, but it's also kind of the Wild West at the same time, where this is the first time things are being done, first time questions are coming up. So there's a lot of questions and pivoting and being ready to, adjust and change things. Like even just this 2019, 2020, first we had the vape ban in Massachusetts, right, where there was lots of questions swirling around vaporizers, which, I don't want to get into that, but there was a lot of it. There was the black market, which is still a big part of the cannabis world.
Sure.
Was, products are hitting the street. And then obviously the legal cannabis world, which is regulated and tested, is implicated in that because there's not a lot of traceability. Where are people getting these products? Who's getting sick? So that became a big challenge for the cannabis industry to figure out. But, that's just an example of having to be adaptable, all this product being pulled off the shelves, products that medical patients and consumers were, used to having access to, all of a sudden they don't have access to. So, mm-hmm. A lot of people like to vape for various reasons. They like it better than, smokable cannabis flower. All of a sudden that's not available. And then fast forward to, pandemic, along with obviously the whole country, the whole world, and lots of other industries, but, the cannabis industry having to adjust and, be prepared to, serve our medical patients, having been deemed essential on the medical side. We can talk about
only on the medical side, right?
Only on the medical side, right?
Right.
But was good that, medical cannabis remained available for patients that rely on it. But
definitely
be able to pivot and adjust, and our staff is amazing, our management team is amazing, and people are just ready to figure it out as we go. So
Did you feel like when that decision came down that medical was essential, recreational was not, which I can see why, you know, the oxymoron of like recreational essential, I get
Yeah.
that. But, you know, there definitely was a feeling, I think, among a lot of people that some of the reasoning behind alcohol being deemed essential and marijuana not was flawed.
Yeah.
And people felt like that was a judgment being passed on how they were interacting with marijuana internally. You know, whatever you can share, did that decision to you guys feel like kind of icky?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the cannabis industry is still battling, you know, sorry, sorry about that.
That's
I'm like still
okay.
connected.
I know we
Um,
said we were going to lead off this conversation with all the
yeah,
caveats of like, there might be a 3-year-old business consultant coming in the room.
yeah, my son might burst in the room at any moment. So, all right, I'm back. Yeah, no, I feel like the cannabis industry is still, you know, battling against attitudes that are decades old, you know, and it's
Right.
like cannabis is still federally illegal. There's, you know, lots of people that hold public office that have all sorts of negative opinions and stereotypes that they still hold about cannabis. You know,
Yeah,
this happened, and you know, I think it's a huge positive that medical cannabis was deemed essential.
absolutely.
Massachusetts was the only state that has legal recreational cannabis that didn't deem recreational cannabis essential.
Interesting.
You know, so like Nevada and Illinois, recreational dispensaries remained open. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think that, you know, how those decisions were made, who knows? I mean, I think there were some reasons given in terms of not wanting from out of state, you know, coming into Massachusetts to buy recreational cannabis. So, you know, it's like you can argue all these points. I
Right.
think ultimately it was short lived. You know, recreational cannabis is back available. I think, you know, for our recreational customers, I think a lot of them stocked up, you know, when they kind of saw it coming. But yeah, you know, there's definitely some hypocrisy there. You know, it's like alcohol being available versus cannabis. I mean, you know, you can discuss those differences. I mean, these
Mhm.
are, you know, substances that people consume. You know, so I mean, for me, I just have tried to just look at it as like, you know, our patients still had access to their medicine. Recreational cannabis had a little bit of a blip, but I think, you know, people saw sort of the pushback, and I think a lot of people were like, saw the hypocrisy. So I think in some ways, like, that decision could be looked at as a positive, because moving forward in the future, people are going to be like, you know what, recreational cannabis is no different than, you know, alcohol being available, and look at all
Right.
the states that have it available. So, you know, it's like people are, I always tell people, it's like our recreational customers may not have a medical card, but many of them are using cannabis for anxiety, depression, PTSD,
Right.
lots of the same things that our medical patients are using cannabis for. So, you know, keeping access open for them is important. So,
It's super important. It's super
yeah,
important. I'm going to back up quickly and welcome everyone who's watching online. I have to say, I have to give a
everybody.
shout out to Diana, who works in our office at Kohl's, because she is our most religious watcher, and I love it. Every time I see that she's on, I'm like, oh, here we are. We're doing it. It's
Hi,
Wednesday. So, hi, Diana. Um,
Diana.
So I want to take a step back because we jumped in fast because you and I already know each other. But for folks
Mhm.
who don't know you,
Yeah.
um, so RISE Amherst is
Yep.
just across 116 from the Mill District. So we consider it the Mill District, which is really
Yep.
exciting because you and I get to connect about a lot of different ideas. And for me, as director of placemaking and thinking about how people interact and come together, and you as outreach specialist, you're thinking about a lot of the same things.
Hmm.
I'm curious how you got to be in the position that you're in,
Yeah.
not just in, you know, the cannabis field, but in general, working with community, what it was that drew you to this kind of connection building between people.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting. So, I professionally spent the past, you know, 10 years prior to coming to cannabis as a chef, a cook. I was in the restaurant industry for a long time. For me, you know, I graduated from UMass back in 2010.
Oh, right. I forgot
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So, and even when I was going to UMass, I was working at a restaurant called the Night Kitchen in Montague. So
Nice.
my fine dining background started. prior to that in high school, I worked at pizza restaurants. Like my whole working life has been in restaurants. So in delis and things like that. So then when I was going to UMass, I came to fine dining at the Night Kitchen. The chef there, Max Brody, was incredible. And he kind of pushed me to go to culinary school if I wanted to take it seriously. So I ended up going to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York for a period of time. And then after that, I landed in Chicago where I just, worked through a number of restaurants. But, for me, it's interesting because I came up in cooking at the time when like Anthony Bourdain was like really becoming huge.
Yeah.
And like, he was a big inspiration for me.
Mm.
I'm 36. So like, I really saw him like become famous, coming from like being a chef to like his first TV shows. And as his books really started to like gain traction and, obviously he became a huge star. But for me, when I was coming up in cooking, I was really inspired by that idea that food is this thing that connects us all. And watching someone like Anthony Bourdain travel the world and seeing all the commonalities that can come from culture to culture, person to person, and how food really breaks down barriers.
Yeah.
And me being a young guy, like going to school for sociology, not really knowing what I was doing, food made sense where it's like, it's this honest transaction of when you're working in a restaurant, you're cooking somebody a meal, they're paying for the meal. And it's this like very pure job where it's like you of work and you're like, all right, that made sense. It's like I have friends who like, went into banking and things like that. I'm like, what do you do? Like, what is, it's interesting for me. I just really struggled with that idea as a young man trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And that connection with food and kind of the purity of it was something that drew me to it. So, as I got older, I'm still passionate about, restaurants and food, if you can't tell. But as I got older and, got into my early 30s and got married and wanted to have a family, it's also well known that the restaurant industry is not the best environment to be a husband or a father. The schedule's grueling. There's a lot of demands. The time to give to your restaurant life is
huge,
unrelenting. The restaurant industry doesn't have it, apologize for that. There's a lot of chefs that take pride in the fact that like their life as a chef is like what comes first and like, their family comes second, I wasn't ready to live that life. So I actually went into food sales for a little while. And then I ended up back in restaurants at the MGM Casino in Springfield. I was a chef for the steakhouse there. And that was sort of my last dance, if you will, with the food industry. Where I was like, all right, I can't do this. Like, I really can't do this. At that point, my son was 2 and I'd convinced myself that I could do it. And pretty quickly, I was like, this isn't going to work. So luckily, my brother had some contacts in the cannabis industry. So I started kind of networking and having conversations with people. This was at the point where recreational cannabis in Massachusetts was still being developed. There weren't any recreational dispensaries open yet. There were only medical dispensaries open. So companies were looking for people to step into management roles. And the cool thing about cannabis is that people come from a lot of diverse backgrounds. So you see a lot of people in the cannabis industry that, have experience and also, it makes sense because it's a new industry, obviously like people in Massachusetts that are coming with like years and years of cannabis experience.
Right.
So, so I fell into a management role with another cannabis company. I was the assistant GM for them for their medical opening and then their recreational opening. And, after that, I had sort of been keeping an eye on GTI and had made some connections there because they're a Chicago-based company and I'd lived in Chicago for a long time. And then, the outreach position opened up and, I'd made some connections and reached out and kind of fell into the role. But kind of connect back to what I was originally saying is like, I feel like for me, a lot of my experience in food suited me well for community outreach. It's not maybe best background in terms of like experience, but I think a lot of the things that I learned in the restaurant industry ended up being really applicable to just working with people in the community and, just being able to connect to people and just, coming to things with good intentions and, bringing my work ethic to it and just trying to do what's best for RISE and do what's best for Amherst and kind of, try to, step up and help our patients and our customers and that type of thing. So, yeah.
That's so awesome. I know a lot of people feel that connectedness to RISE, that there is a lot of emphasis on being there for the community, which is felt, and I think that that's amazing. I think it's so interesting, you talking about sort of making the decision to exit the restaurant world, especially around family and kids. And then I think about you a lot because I know that you have a fairly new baby, your second child.
Yep.
And I believe she was born in March. Is that right?
Yeah,
Right as
March.
we
Yeah,
were
March
going.
20th.
So it's like from worrying that you wouldn't get enough time
Yeah.
with your kids to almost getting this pseudo paternity leave,
Yeah.
because you get to be at home so much in her first months, but you're also working from home.
Yeah.
How has this COVID time been for you as a professional and as a dad and a
Yeah.
partner?
Yeah. So we are, like, my wife and I reflect on the fact that, like, we're super lucky. You know what I mean? I think that, like, everything that's been going on since this started, like, we're as lucky as it gets. You know, for me, working for a cannabis company, being able to work from home. My wife works for Shriners Hospital. Her being able to, was on maternity leave, but now she's back. But just being in a position where we can both work partially from home is huge. Being able to be home with our children. I think for my son, it was kind of a good thing because when his little sister was born, if everything had been normal, he'd be going to daycare every day. And I think he would have gotten a little bit of that older brother jealousy.
Yeah.
But he was like home with her from the beginning. And we kind of, it's like I tell people, it's kind of like being on like a Groundhog Day spaceship house. And it's like every day is kind of the same. We're quarantining here. Obviously things have opened up a little bit in Massachusetts, but, we're still being really careful with the little one. But yeah, it's been sort of this amazing time of like us being able to bond as a family unit in like a way that like we never would have been able to. We're just super lucky. We've just been trying to, remain positive and just, take it day by day and do our best to like, my son's 3, so it is what it is, but, homeschool, do the alphabet and stuff. And, we're both working from home. So there's days where it's difficult to balance, like who's taking care of the baby, making sure my son's getting enough attention, making sure he's not watching too much TV, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we got a yard, we're good. I mean, it's like I have friends, one particular friend who lives in New York City, who like, at least early on, initially, it's like, he was like stuck in his apartment, and it's like, it's like a lot. So, but no, we've been great. And I think for me also, like I reflect back on my time in the food industry, and the food industry's been decimated. It's like I have friends, especially the ones who work for independent, smaller restaurants in big cities. Those places are really, really struggling. My friends that work for like larger hotel groups, they're kind of okay. It seems like they're going to be able to kind of wage the storm and get through this. But it's been tough for the food industry. So it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm kind of glad I got out of it when I did.
Yeah.
And I feel
you
really
should move out here.
Yeah.
Come hang with us in the Mill District.
Back in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like we're like the biggest takeaway is that we're just super lucky. So
yeah, that's awesome. So one thing that you and I have gotten to connect on just recently that I'm excited to talk about is public art and some ideas about how art really impacts the spaces that we're inhabiting and the spaces that we are sort of building for others to inhabit. And I think especially through this time for me, recognizing that sometimes that sort of intangible feeling that art can bring of progress, of something happening, even when some things feel like they're sort of spinning in place. I'm curious how you came to be interested in public art as that driver of engagement.
Yeah, I think like for me, like I'll just like, this is like going to be the most unsophisticated art discussion ever, but it's like for me,
I love it.
Like I've always loved art. Like I'm covered in tattoos. I grew up around art. Like my parents like aren't artists, but they're people that like really appreciate art. you know, like growing up in Longmeadow, my parents would take us up to Northampton, and I don't know if anybody remembers the Words and Pictures Museum.
Yes, I was just talking about that.
Yeah, the Words and Pictures Museum was like the shit, and it was like, you know, they had all this amazing comic book art, and like there was like a downstairs area with like these full-scale Ninja Turtles, and I into the Ninja Turtles. So like my life, I feel like I've been surrounded by art. My parents lived in Mexico when they were younger, so like they've got Mexican art. Like we went on a family trip to Alaska when I was younger, and they brought back like all this amazing art. So it's like for me, I feel like all these different moments in my life are connected back, you know, through art. My sisters are really amazing artists. My brother was always a good artist. I feel like I just didn't put in the time. Like I feel like I could have been, like if I like, you know, my parents put me in art classes, but you know, I just, you know, I was always that kid. I was like taking guitar lessons and I wouldn't practice. But
that's art.
yeah,
Visual art's just one kind of art.
Yeah, so you know, so for me, it's like it's always been big. I feel like growing up in this area, like even now, like they recently put up like a big mural of the Ninja Turtles on the side of a building in Northampton. So yeah, it's like I always just feel like art, public art, art in cities, like is what makes places special. So like when I lived in Chicago, tons of like sick graffiti in Chicago, tons of amazing public art there. And it's like, you know, it's like a city without that would be like, you know, nothing. So it's like that to me is like really what makes places special, beautiful. Like you said, it conveys feeling, emotion, all that stuff. It's just, you know, for me, it's like, you know, the most amazing stuff is like beautiful art that's in a city. Like, I don't even know, like there's just one graffiti artist in Chicago would have these like full scale, you know, murals of this character, Rocket Boy, and they're just like super cool. So yeah, it's like, you know, working at RISE, you know, that's been a goal of mine for a while, is to get some art up, you know, to help beautify Amherst, you know, to help, you know, the people who live in Amherst see something really cool when they drive by, and, you know, that's what I love. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing when you mentioned the Ninja Turtles, something we've talked about a lot in the Mill District and are really picking up steam on, is starting to highlight more the really amazing culture of children's books and young adults books and art that exists in the area. I mean, the Valley, especially Amherst, has so many authors for young people, artists who are doing amazing illustrations for that work, you know, the Eric Carle Museum. And so as we keep going with that, right? I mean, as we keep going with that, I'm excited to bring more and more of that to the surface. And I know it might be hard in our conversation today to bring together the marijuana industry and children's art, but you know, from a placemaking perspective, from a placemaking perspective of, you know, how do we look at a community as a whole, from the youngest members of that community to the oldest members of that community? And I think the field that you're working in really, in its sort of ability to impact people in a lot of different ways, and impact their quality of life. And then, you know, it's sort of, I feel like there's this kind of this baton handing to placemakers and people who are taking that community feeling of health and well-being and then exploding it outwards to being able to just enjoy life in all its facets, which is really what the Mill District is about. So it's exciting. It's so cool.
Yeah. I feel like cannabis is a, you know, so, you know, cannabis opens your mind, you know, it's you know, something that can really, you know, bring about new perspectives, and, you know, it's, you know, has a lot of power as a plant in that way. And I feel like art does the same thing. You know, so many artists use cannabis to help their creativity. So it just makes sense. You know, it's like one of the first things when I came on as outreach specialist was like immediately people that worked at the dispensary were like, we want to get some local artists in here. We want to get some local artwork in there. You know, so we do actually have a local art wall in the dispensary now, which just highlights basically just pieces that
awesome
brought in. Yeah, we're trying to work out like other stuff, and we ended up settling on the just kind of like the section of the store that's like our little local
gallery. Yeah.
but yeah, our little gallery. But it's cool, you know, and I think you know, people that are into it and want to drop off a piece of art for us to display, it's cool. You know, we put their name up next to it. And just
Yeah.
all the people that are customers, patients of RISE that are artists, the people that work there that are artists. And, you know, for the people that come in and take a look at it, it's just, you know, cool to see the community aspect of that. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's definitely, as I think ahead to putting our local artist gallery in place and just bringing more and more people into our little corner of Amherst. It's great to know that that's something that you guys are offering, and I can
Yeah.
definitely spread the word on that because it
Yeah,
is.
a lot of passion. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people that work for us are just super passionate about that, and you know, hopefully we'll continue that and maybe have some new iterations of that and
Yeah.
start up maybe some larger pieces. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your thinking behind the mural design, the way you would
Yeah.
envision it?
Yeah. So I mean, you know, we're so early in it, and I've talked to you about this. I'm the type of person where I just dive into the deep end and just like start exploring like how I can get something done.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're trying to make it happen. You know, I'd like to get it done before winter. You know, we'll see if that goes down. But yeah, I mean, you know, for me, I feel like having a piece of art on the building that can pay homage to the history of cannabis in
Yeah.
America is kind of the goal, you know, whether that be, you know, in more of an abstract artistic sense, you know, or actually paying homage to specific figures that have helped along the way. You know, from California when like during the early 90s, they were really pushing to get medical cannabis legalized and recognized for HIV/AIDS patients.
Right.
You know, the LGBTQ community was so involved in that. So, you know, even if it's just like a face, you know, of person, you know, that was involved in that movement and
Yeah.
like have their name below it, but just like have acknowledgement of these people. And then like for the people that want to ask, like, who are these people? You know, you can kind of get into that. I think that that would be cool. But yeah, just kind of like the journey, like all the way up today. And, you know, it's like like you and I have discussed, the cannabis industry is still kind of in a struggle to, you know, get people out of prison that are in prison for minor cannabis offenses. Kind of the hypocrisy around modern cannabis, where you've got large companies that are opening dispensaries in multiple states, and then you still have people that are serving lengthy prison sentences for minor cannabis offenses and nothing else.
Right.
So trying
Right.
to get, you know, to a point in this country where people recognize that and it's fixed. You know, obviously we're at a point in our in America where there's lots of issues that are in the forefront of people's consciousness, but that's definitely one that's, you know, connected to a lot. You know, I think working in the cannabis industry, it's interesting in sort of the socio-political atmosphere now, and you know, realizing that cannabis is connected so deeply to race, and you know, the way that, you know, Black and brown communities have been targeted, you know, by
Yeah.
police, and you know, not to get too deep into it, but you know, having some
It's
sort
real though.
of through a piece of art that, you know, RISE and GTI, although we are a large cannabis company, we recognize that, and you know, it's something that we're passionate about too, you know, as an organization and as individuals.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like I said, it's kind of early in the process, but
Yeah.
we have a piece of art that somehow conveys all that, which is, I guess, kind of a lot for a piece of
Artists
art,
are
but
really used to tall
yeah,
orders. So
yeah. So, you know, something like that, you know, maybe not in an explicit sense, you know, lays all that out there, but just acknowledges, you know, where we're at, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Planning, early planning, but we'll see what happens.
Yes. No, I love your thinking around that. I want to throw it out there to everyone watching. Please feel free to ask questions. I know I have a lot of great questions, but please feel free to chime in if you've got something you want to ask Ben. Don't be shy. Um, no, I think your thinking around it is right on, and one of the reasons that art does get employed in this way so much, I think, in this creative placemaking and sort of economic development sense, is that there is sort of a subtlety that art can bring to some of those more challenging conversations. So, you know, when we think about a visual representation of the history of cannabis in America, which is tied into all these current conversations we're having, the incredible thing about art, in my opinion, is that just having a mural celebrating colorfully that history, you don't even need to explicitly say it, because what you're doing is you're starting conversations in people's cars as they drive by or as they drive up. For anyone who's not sure where RISE is, if you're headed down 116 towards Hadley and you take a right, is it still Meadow Street on your side? Are you guys technically on Meadow? Yeah. So if you take a right onto Meadow Street, RISE is the yellowish cement building that is right there as you turn the corner. So there's a great wall facing the road for this mural work. I mean, it's just this amazing canvas. And so putting the artwork there instigates these conversations, which I think is one of the most important things right now in society as we try to call people in and get these conversations flowing. So it's I think your impulse is right on.
Yeah, for sure. And like that's like one thing I was thinking about too, of just having faces, you know, and I've discussed the artists that, you know, we're interested in working with, but, you know, just having faces of like different human beings also connecting back to, like, again, cannabis being something that connects people. You know, it's one of these things, we have all these things in our lives that, you know, whether it be food or cannabis, that connect all people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
So having a visual representation of, like, you know, all people are welcome, you know what I mean? It's like RISE is a place where anyone can come to and find, you know, well-being is huge. So
yeah. Do you, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because that's what I do. You know, visual art being sort of a gateway sometimes into conversations. Do you think about other ways to engage the conversations you start? In partnership maybe with people?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like for us, it's like finding partners, you know, in the community to help, you know, fight those battles. You know, now we're talking about like the Last Prisoner Project, which is
can you talk a little bit about what that is about?
Yeah, so the Last Prisoner Project is an organization that has actually gained a lot of attention over the past several months. RISE and GTI has been working with them sort of, I think we're like the first large cannabis company to kind of partner with them. But the Last Prisoner Project is really like their goal is in their name. They're basically doing everything that they can to get cannabis offenders released from prison. You know, and basically their mission statement is like they won't rest until like the last cannabis prisoner is set free. So that's really a great goal, you know, obviously to like really, it's a lot, but you know, they do everything for just offering legal services to individuals, fighting on behalf of individuals who've been locked up for a long time. So like at RISE and Amherst, we've got donation boxes where, you know, we take donations for Last Prisoner Project. On a larger corporate level, we're working with them. Like we've had several store openings in different markets in the country where like our first day of sales has gone directly to the Last Prisoner Project.
Wow.
Trying to, like, you know, do everything that we can as an organization to support them in their mission. Because again, it's like, I feel like you can't be someone that's involved in the cannabis industry and not recognize the hypocrisy of the fact that there's still people in this country that are locked up for the same thing. There's people that are getting locked up today, you know, like there was a story, you know, that I think went semi-viral. I don't know. I never know like what the standard is for something being viral. But,
you saw it.
Yeah. So, you know, a guy that got arrested, he was a veteran, disabled veteran in Alabama who was arrested and is being charged and sentenced to like 60 days in jail for having cannabis, you know, medical cannabis that he'd purchased in another state. But it's just like, you know, it's like we can't have that happening in a country where people are profiting from the same thing.
Right.
You know? And it's obviously, you know, more and more of these companies are, you know, being run by, you know, older white men, and then you still have young black men who are being arrested for the same thing. It's just, we can't stand for that. Nobody should. So, I think RISE, like, is doing everything we can to support organizations like that. So that's a good example of, how we're, trying to, follow through on some of those conversations that we start.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And it's so crucial. And it really, these flashpoints of change so often happen around business.
Yeah,
Business
totally.
is a major driver, right? This capitalist society that we're in, it's a crucial part that businesses, and it sounds like GTI and RISE really do understand that you have a voice in that, working in that industry, which is incredible.
Yeah, totally. And, it's like in a lot of ways, RISE and GTI and a lot of cannabis companies, we're still kind of a startup, growing at a very fast rate. Like we just brought on a director of, corporate social responsibility, who's going to further, and he's based out of our headquarters in Chicago, but he's going to even further get more of these initiatives that are going to be on a company-wide basis. Like the Last Prisoner Project is a big one where we're really working with them in all of our markets. But then we have a lot of local stuff going on at each individual store. So I think he's going to be doing a lot to help drive more of those larger initiatives and get, some of those partner organizations. Because really it's like, for us, it's like we're a cannabis dispensary. It's like that's what we're doing. We're helping people find, cannabis to help, well-being in their personal lives. But finding those other organizations that really align with us is the goal. Here's my
business consultant.
Yeah.
Hey, buy my jacket.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you got to do. Good job, buddy. Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
I
was hoping that would happen. I'm so
yeah. Yeah. No, he's the star. So.
He's got a lot of opinions too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. He's like at that age, like I feel he's gonna be 4 in December, where like he's constantly like correcting us. Like, his opinion of adults must be like really low. He's like, you guys clearly don't understand.
Like these guys, man.
Like, let me just explain to you. So it's really funny with his grandparents too. He's constantly just talking to them like they have like no idea what it's great.
It's like, yeah, right. That post-millennial generation. It's like, if we thought millennials really, thought better of themselves than us, this next generation is going to be like, oh, guys.
Well, they have so much information. Like, I just feel like, he's like 4, he like knows how to use his iPad. He's like done watching.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So wild. So wild.
Life lessons. So yeah.
You can learn a lot, right?
Yeah.
You're busy, it helps to have someone around who's just spoon feeding you life lessons in return for the spoon feeding of food.
Daniel Tiger has so many lessons. Many lessons.
Real. That is real. It's so true.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a hard stop at 11:45. I'm going to encourage again anyone watching to throw a question out there. But I also want to go back to what you just said about hiring a director of corporate social responsibility. I don't know if I said that exactly right.
Yeah.
But it strikes me, there's been a very similar thing in my professional field of creative placemaking, where more and more large organizations, from municipal government to architecture firms to community organizations, community wellness organizations, have hired placemakers and creative placemakers. Kohl's is a great example of that, of seeing the value of working well within the community that you are in, whether that is a local community or a global community, depending on what your business is and what your impact is. It does feel like more and more large organizations are recognizing the intrinsic value of outreach, of connection, of, changing the way business is done and looking at it through lenses of wellness or art or, all these different things. So that's amazing that GTI is taking that next step with that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, I'll probably, like, again, this will be the most unsophisticated version of this, but like, I feel
Okay.
like, it's like, it's like societies, I feel like, change first in a lot of situations, and then the government will react to that. It's like,
Hmm.
I feel like in our minds, we feel like it should work the other way around, where like our local
Right.
and state governments and federal governments should like be making these changes and they should be on top of it. But really, it's like, I feel like companies and, individuals, those minds need to change first, and then companies can react to that. And you can start to see like real social change around that. And I think, yeah, there's, definitely, you can just see it where like the conversation that's happening in America is being responded to almost immediately by a lot of large companies and
Yeah.
organizations that are recognizing that need to be more responsible and figure out, how they are working with their communities, how they're working with their customers, what they're doing to recognize and help issues in society. And I feel like that's changing, happening like a lot more immediately, where it's like, obviously there's so much more work to be done government level. So I feel like the more, that organizations like GTI and people can just, work to help change minds and educate people, the better, and then hopefully things will just continue to kind of, the wheels of society will continue to turn in the right direction. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm so with you on that hope, and I really think that the work that you're doing, the work that your company is doing, being able to partner with you guys. I know we had a lot of plans that COVID kind of like,
yeah,
but we're
totally.
trying. We're
Yeah.
trying to find, those ways to keep partnering, and I really value the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Community outreach has certainly changed a lot since the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Digital stuff like this. But yeah, I think hopefully things will get back to normal in a year or so.
A whole
Yeah.
different kind of normal.
Yeah.
There's a lot we're happy to let go of too, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much for making the time to do this. I know you've got a lot of
Absolutely.
moving parts
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the world, and I'm looking forward to keeping going with you on these projects. They're
Yeah,
awesome.
no, thank you, Hannah, for everything that you do. You've been like, since I've started working in Amherst, you've been like one of the greatest partners and advocates, and just everything you've done to help me out and help me navigate stuff. You're the best. So really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love it.
Yeah.
Have a great
So,
rest of your day.
all right, bye everybody. Take it easy.